Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopal Gopinath Shyam Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Mathura Dham Ki Jai, Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Jamuna Mai Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai, Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol, all glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories, all glories, all glories to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Hari Hari Bol. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutalesh Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaudavani Pachalini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desatarine. Good morning, devotees.
Good morning.
Good morning. Let me just.
Good morning.
Good morning. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 9, Verse 30. So we will start by chanting the verse. So we'll go through it. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Okay, we'll start from the verse. Yavat Sakya Sakur Iveshte Krita Pragya Visharga Vibhavjami Bhojanam Aviklavaste Parikarmani Stito Mame Samunadha Mado Jamaninaha Yavat Sakka Sakur Ivesha Tekrita Pragya Visharge Vibhajami Bhojanam Aviklavaste Parikarmani Stito Mame Samundaha Mado Jamaninaha Yavat Sakka Sakur Ivesha Tekrita Pragya Visharga Vibhajami Bhojanam Aviklavaste Parikarmani Stito Mame Samunada Mado Jamanina. Hare Krishna. Devotees, would anyone like to chant the verse?
Yavat Sakha Sakyur Iveshate Krita Praja Visarge Vibhajami Bhojanam Aviklavaste Parikarmani Sthito Mame Samunnadhamabdo Jamanina.
Yavat Sakha Sakyurviveshate Krita Praja Visarge Vibhajami Bhojanam Aviklavaste Parikarmani Stito Mame Samunnadha Madoja Manina.
Hare Krishna. Yavat sakha sakyor hiveshate kritaha raja visarge vivejami bhojanam aviklavaste parikarmani stito mate samunatta mado ajmanina. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Okay, synonyms. Yavat, as it is. Sekhara, friend. Sakyu, unto the friend. Eva, like that. Isha. Isha, O Lord. Te, you. Krita, have accepted. Pragya, living entities. Bisharge, in the matter of creation. Vibhajami, as I shall do it differently. Oh, my Lord. Janam, those who are born. Aviklava, without being perturbed. Te, your. Parikarmani, in the matter of service. Stitaha, thus situated. Ma, may it never be. May, unto me. Samun nada, resulting arise. Mada, madness. Aja, O unborn one. Manina, thus being thought of. Translation. O my Lord, the unborn, you have shaken hands with me just as a friend does with a friend, as if equal in position. I shall be engaged in the creation of different types of living entities, and I shall be occupied in your service. I shall have no perturbation. But I pray that all this may not give rise to pride, as if I were the supreme. Purport. Lord Brahma is definitely situated in the humor of friendship with the Lord. Every living being is eternally related with the personality of Godhead in one of 5 different transcendental humors, namely Shanta, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, and Madhurya. We have already discussed these 5 kinds of humors in relationship with the personality of Godhead. It is clearly exhibited herein that Lord Brahma is related to the personality of Godhead in the transcendental humor of friendship. A pure devotee may be related with the Lord in any one of the transcendental humors, even in the humor of parenthood, but the devotee of the Lord is always a transcendental servitor. No one is equal to or greater than the Lord. That is the version of the Bhagavad Gita. Brahmaji, although eternally related with the Lord in the transcendental humor of friendship, and although entrusted with the most exalted post of creating different grades of living entities, is still conscious of his position, that he is neither the Supreme Lord nor supremely powerful. It is possible that some extremely powerful personality within or without the universe may sometimes show more power than the Lord himself. Still, the pure devotee knows that this power is a vibhuti delegated by the Lord. And such a delegated powerful living entity is never independent. Sri Hanumanji crossed the Indian Ocean by jumping over the sea, and Lord Sri Ramachandra engaged himself in marching over the bridge. But this does not mean that Hanumanji was more powerful than the Lord. Sometimes the Lord gives extraordinary powers to his devotee, but the devotee knows always that the power belongs to the personality of Godhead, and that the devotee is only an instrument. The pure devotee is never puffed up like the non-devotee class of men who falsely think that they are God. It is astonishing to see how a person who is being kicked by the laws of the Lord's illusory energy at every step can falsely think of becoming one with the Lord. Such thinking is the last snare of the illusory energy offered to the conditioned soul. The first illusion is that he wants to become Lord of the material world by accumulating wealth and power. But when he is frustrated in that attempt, he wants to be one with the Lord. So both becoming the most powerful man in the material world and desiring to become one with the Lord are different illusory snares. And because the pure devotees of the Lord are surrendered souls, they are above the illusory snares of Maya. Because Lord Brahma is a pure devotee, even though the first dominating deity in the material world, and therefore able to do many wonderful things, he would never, like the non-devotee with a poor fund of knowledge, have the audacity to think of becoming one with the Lord. People with a poor fund of knowledge should take lessons from Brahma when they are puffed up with false notion of becoming God. Factually, Lord Brahma does not create the living entities. In the beginning of the creation, he is empowered to give different bodily shapes to the living entities according to their work during the last millennium. Brahmaji's duty is just to wake the living entities from their slumber and to engage them in their proper duty. The different grades of living entities are not created by Brahmaji by his capricious whims, but he is entrusted with the task of giving the living entities different grades of bodies so that they can work accordingly. And still he is conscious that he is only instrumental, so that he may not think of himself as the supreme, powerful Lord. Devotees of the Lord are engaged in the specific duty offered by the Lord, and such duties are successfully carried out without hindrance because they are ordained by the Lord. The credit of success goes not to the doer, but to the Lord. But persons with a poor fund of knowledge take the credit of success to their own accounts and give nothing to the credit of the Lord. That is the symptom of the non-devotee class of men. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshulun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutare Svayam Rupa Kadhamayam Dadati Sva Padantikam. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Before beginning, I would like to ask permission and blessings from all the advanced Vaishnavas here and throughout the universe. Please bless me in speaking something in line with Srila Prabhupada and the Parampara. Go back to the verse itself. Oh, my Lord, the unborn, you have shaken hands with me, just as a friend does with a friend, as if equal in position. I shall be engaged in the creation of different types of living entities, and I shall be occupied in your service. I shall have no perturbation, but I pray that all this may not give rise to pride, as if I were the supreme. Here, Lord Brahma is in his interaction with the Supreme Lord, Krishna. And Krishna, earlier in this chapter, in one of the verses, Krishna actually, so he shakes his hand. It's interesting because we can see that handshaking is bona fide from a Vedic perspective. We might think of that as a Western cultural thing. You know, when you meet someone, you shake their hand, and it has all different types of iterations in this modern day. You got, hand slaps, pounds, things like that. But here we have Krishna is shaking hands with Brahma. So that's a sign of respect, a sign of, in this case, we can understand a sign of friendship. As Brahma puts it, you have shaken hands with me just as a friend does with a friend, as if equal in position. And so what Brahma is concerned about here, what he's asking, or he's kind of praying to Krishna, not kind of, he is praying to Krishna. He's saying, you are the unborn and you are the supreme, the highest being. We are operating as friends. And what Brahma is concerned about is that he does not want any disruption in his service, or he does not want his mind to be perturbed. And most of all, he does not want this to give rise to pride. And pride is as Lord Brahma is functioning in the material world here, we can see that pride is a very common, that there's a common tendency for us to exhibit pride, especially when we are feeling like we are doing something great, even if it's very small in the scope of reality relative to everything else that's going on. When we are doing something and we get a little result, the tendency for pride to grow, the bij of pride to grow, is very common. And actually, the word in this verse that is being translated in the translation as pride is the word madha, madness. So in one sense, pride creates a madness, and that madness causes us to do many things that are against our best interest. And most of all, it causes us to have a sense of false identification and attachment with the identity and the activities that are only in relation to the physical body and mind, which ultimately are temporary and which ultimately is not the real position of who we are. So this pride or madness gives us a lack of clarity and direction towards the true position of who we are. And as we understand and is described here in this purport in this verse, who we are is eternal servants. So we are an eternal living entity in connection with the supreme living entity. And as the purport is describing here, there's never a time that we can become as the actual jivatma. There's never a time when we can become one with the Lord. So the two kind of pieces that are being described here is the two snares, like trap. A snare is a trap. It's kind of an old way of saying it, I think, because most people don't really use the word snare very much. But snare is like they catch animals in the woods with a snare. It catches you, and then once you're caught, you're stuck. You can't get out. So these two snares. The first one is where the majority of us are in the Western world, throughout the world, but it's kind of like the basic stage. Most people are coming from the position, the snare, that they are the Lord of the material energy, that they are going to create wealth and power, and they are going to enjoy this material energy. And this is the ultimate goal of life. That's the first snare, right? And as we see in this purport, what's happening is at some point, when one goes through all the heavy endeavor and effort to get to the point of having material success and wealth and power, and then maybe lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, they come to the realization that there is no real satisfaction in this wealth and power. So then the next step for them is to say, okay, I'm renouncing it all. I am renouncing everything, and I am going to become one with the Lord. And I am going to become a one with the Lord. I'm just looking at where it says here in the purport exactly. The first illusion is that he wants to become the Lord of the material world. We want to become the Lord of the material world by accumulating wealth and power, but then we're frustrated in that attempt. He wants to become one with the Lord. So we have these two sides where then we want to become one with the Lord. These are the snares of Maya. And what keeps us stuck in those snares of Maya? What we see here is that it is because of this pride, this madness that comes up, of this identification with the body, but who we really are and what is the real function of our existence is to be a servant. And there are these different humors that are described from different aspects of the Vedic literature. What is a humor or a rasa? It's a difficult kind of concept to translate into English. Because when you say humor of friendship, like personally, I don't really know what that means. Or a rasa, but it's like a rasa is some kind of, it's like some kind of taste or some kind of experience or feeling. And we have this, like, we all have this practical experience of different types of rasas with different types of people and things where we have a relationship, a type of relationship with people. Although for the most part, it's not categorized as such in kind of English language as, okay, we're identifying, okay, yeah, it's like, okay, you have parent, friend, lover, things like that. But it's like the actual essence of that relationship. That's what that rasa is. Like, what does it mean to have that type of relationship? And what's interesting, very interesting for us to understand is that, as Prabhupada puts in the purport, every living being is eternally related with the personality of Godhead in one of 5 different types of transcendental humors or rasas: Shanta, Dhasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, and Madhurya. Now, I'll kind of go over these quickly in relation to what they are. And these are described throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam in different sections, but also, very interestingly, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he was staying at Prayag, he instructed Rupa Goswami. This is in the Madhya Lila, chapter 19, starting around verse 135. So this whole section where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is explaining to Rupa Goswami the different aspects of what our connection is with Krishna, he explains to him the different aspects of what the Sanchya, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, and Madhurya are. And he describes the opposite of it. It's very interesting. If you have a chance, you want to check it out and really get deeper into this, because I'm not going to read it all, but I'm just going to touch on some points. But you can go through and look at this section. Super potent section. Of course, the whole Chaitanya Charitamrita is extreme nectar and potency, but this particular point here. So just a couple points. So it starts around 156. Prabhupada says, the perverted reflections of these rasas are found in the material world, speaking of these 5 rasas. So the perverted reflection of these rasas are found in the material world. Land, home, furniture, and other inert material objects are related in Shanta, or the neutral and silent sense, whereas servants work in the Dasya relationship. The reciprocation between friends is called Sakya. The affection of a parent for a child is known as Vatsalya. And the affairs of conjugal love constitute Madhurya. These 5 relationships in the material world are distorted reflections of the original pure sentiments, which should be understood and perfected in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master. In the material world, the perverted rasas bring frustration. If these rasas are reestablished with Lord Krishna, the result is eternal blissful life. End quote. That was from the purport from CC. So what Srila Prabhupada is explaining here is that these rasas, we are experiencing the perverted reflection of these rasas in the material world. Of course, we all have this, we have parental, we have this and that. And if we notice all our relationships in the material world, what do? They end in frustration. We have high hopes for our relationship with our, whatever it is. But over time, we find that so much frustration comes in these relationships in the material world. Why? It's explained here. Because they are perverted reflections. And because we are in illusion, because we have this mada, as described in the verse, this illusion And a lot of, and it's stemming from a lot of it stemming from pride, madness. We are thinking that these relationships will bring us happiness, but we understand from this teaching that actually it is the rasas and the reestablishment, how under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, to reawaken and reestablish our relationship with Lord Krishna, who is the source of all of these rasas. So every single one of these relationships, these different types of relationships, we can identify and connect in with our eternal relationship that we have with the one supreme person who is the source of all pleasure, who is our best friend, our best well-wisher. And from there, we can actually attain the type of happiness that we are looking for in this world, because we're always seeking after happiness. We are seeking after some kind of pleasure. That is the nature of the soul, the nature of the Sat Chit Ananda, the nature of the eternal Jiva, is to seek after some type of happiness. And we're seeking after it, what? In relationships. What does a relationship mean? There's some interaction, there's some connection. So that's another clear point and proof that you can't have a relationship with a void, right? God, Krishna, the Supreme, is a person. It's a personality. This relationship that we have is with a person. And that relationship gives us the rasas are inside of that. So a couple of examples. Again, this one's from the Madhya Lila, chapter 19. There's a whole list of how some examples of different devotees and what those different devotees have in relation to their relationship or rasas. So examples of Sankhya Bhaktas are the 9 Yogendras, the 4 Kumaras. And the example, this is specifically from the purport in the verses. Examples of devotees in Dasya Bhakti are innumerable. So Dasya Bhakti is like the servitude. So it seems as if what Prabhupada is saying, examples of devotees in Dasya Bhakti are so great that it's innumerable. And he says, for such devotees exist everywhere. In Vrindavan, examples of devotees in fraternity are Sridham and Sudama. Sudama. So we know Sudama, the Brahmin, he's a friend of Krishna's. They grew up in the Gurukul. So some devotees have this. So in Dwarka, the Lord's friends are Bhima and Arjuna. In Vrindavan, the devotees in parental love are Mother Yashoda and Father Nanda Maharaj. And in Dwarka, the Lord's parents are Vasudev and Devaki. There are also other superior persons who are devotees in parental love. The chief devotees in conjugal love are the gopis in Vrindavan, the queens in Dwarka, and the goddesses of fortune in Vaikuntha. These devotees are innumerable. Attachment for Krishna is divided into 2 categories. One is attachment with awe and reverence, and the other is pure attachment without reverence. So these different types of rasas, somehow we have this eternal rasa. Now I don't know a lot about this, but there was some point in time in ISKCON's history where some devotees were like going to some Babaji's in Radhakund or something like that, and there was some guru or someone there who was saying that he could like identify what a devotee's specific kind of mellow or rasa was, and give them some mantras or some connection to this. But from what I can understand, Srila Prabhupada never actually made a point for any devotees within ISKCON to try to identify this in this like particular kind of type of practice that we have in terms of chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, and that would naturally come about when, throughout our process of, like, once we actually go back to Godhead, that's when this rasa, or this real connection, will come out. I don't have a lot of information about that, and if any devotees here kind of have any thoughts or relation to how one might uncover their specific rasa that they have, and we're happy to discuss this here. But the important thing right now that we just want to understand mostly is that we all have a unique relationship with Krishna. Why? Because we are all individuals. We are all personalities, eternal personalities. And that unique relationship is with the unique personality Krishna. It's not with an empty void. It's not with an empty, effulgence of, Brahman. So we have a unique relationship with Krishna. And it's one of these 5 rasas: Sancha, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, Madhurya. And what is the ultimate goal of our life is to reawaken and reestablish that relationship. And that relationship is there, but it's also, as Prabhupada puts it in the purport, underneath, you could say, the umbrella of transcendental service, as a transcendental servitor. That's how it's put in the purport. So even though we are in these relationships, they're kind of in these relationships under the umbrella of being a transcendental servitor of Lord Krishna. And what Lord Brahma is asking for here in this purport, and what he's trying to assure and pray for, is that he does not get puffed up and prideful, because he is getting a very great power from Krishna, that power to create. Because Krishna, as we also see in the purport, and we can see throughout so many historical stories in the Srimad Bhagavatam and all of the acharyas, and so many things that we can see that these great devotees have done. And by having been empowered and getting the power and tuning in and channeling into the power from Krishna. But what the acharyas are not doing, which is different from what we're doing, is they're not allowing that to create a sense of pride in their heart. We can see that, like, what's described here is the devotees are used as instruments. Lord Brahma is being used as an instrument. Arjuna, as he said, Krishna told him, you are just but an instrument in the hands in my plan. So either way, do it to fight or don't fight, but this is going to happen regardless. So this kind of plays into our ultimate duty, but we are instruments. And to the degree that we can be used by the Supreme Personality of Godhead as devotees, is the degree that the glory and greatness of our existence can really shine through, and we can become who we really are meant to be and do great things for Krishna, as an instrument for Krishna. And those great things might not be things that are so great in terms of what society says is great, or what, we think from our prideful mind is great. Because all service to Krishna, pure-hearted service, is the most glorious thing. And sometimes that shows up as a world, traveling acharya like Srila Prabhupada, that's traveling the world and, revolutionizing the whole world's understanding of who they are. Groundbreaking, altering the course of society at the highest level, like Srila Prabhupada did and is doing continually now. And sometimes that shows up as a sweeper in the temple. But ultimately, or sometimes it shows up like Arjuna on the battlefield, firing arrows. Or sometimes it could show up as a parent, taking care of their children nicely. As long as Krishna is in the center, then we are, and truly in the center, and the madha, as it's put here, hasn't infected our approach. And what is the approach is ultimately to serve, to be in that transcendental servitorship, then we are on the right path. So that's what we can understand here. And as being used by an instrument, the devotees are coming through. They're being, used by Krishna. And in that reciprocation, in that rasa, we have these different types of positions. So we can understand that as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu tells us, Trinadapi Suni Chena, this is why of all the verses and what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu actually wrote down, this direction is given to us. We should, what he's telling us is to be more humble than a blade of grass and more tolerant than a tree, to avoid this type of pride, because this is something that will take us away and create some type of difficulties in our practice. And as we can see, if we do end up in this prideful situation, it could take us away. And so this helpful prayer that Lord Brahma is saying to us, I pray that all this may not give rise to pride as if I were the supreme. And the first snare is to think we are the supreme, is to think that wealth and power is going to be the thing that actually gives us happiness, and that we can become the Lord. But ultimately, that is a foolish approach, and it is an approach based in madness. So, and then what is the second snare? As we've described, as we can see, the second snare is that then we can think, oh, that we are that we can actually become one with the Lord. But this also cannot be, this as was described here, this is another big mistake, which I think for most of us, we're not in a position where we're thinking, oh, we're going to become one with the Lord. We're mostly in a position where we think we're going to control this material energy and find happiness in this material energy. So if we start there and we recognize that that's where we're going to get lost, and we stay connected to these teachings that give us the direction to have to come from a place of humility and tolerance. And even if we are given a potency or what's called some type of vibhuti, right, as it's put here in the purport, still the pure devotee knows that this power is a vibhuti delegated by the Lord. And such a delegated, powerful living entity is never independent. If we get a little bit of power, and I know from my own perspective, and I can only speak for myself, but just coming into devotional service and coming in touch with Srila Prabhupada, there's been so many, let's say, talents or something that, like, some kind of shakti inside of my own ability, not to say that it's great, but from where it was to what I was able to do as a devotee, just in the clarity of mind, I can feel like, wow, Krishna's really, like, providing some type of power within my heart to actually be able to, like, understand and see things in a totally different way. And this is where I know for myself, I have to be very careful not to think, oh, this is me. Well, I'm not independent of this. I'm not independent of the Lord. Just as he said in the purport here, even sometimes the devotee can do things that seem even greater than the Lord himself, where, like, Hanuman, he's creating a bridge, right? Hanuman creates a bridge for Lord Ramachandra so that Lord Ramachandra can then, so Sri Hanumanji crossed the Indian Ocean by jumping over the sea, and Lord Sri Ramachandra engaged him in marching over the bridge. But this does not mean that Hanumanji was more powerful than the Lord. So Hanumanji jumps over, right? but then Ramachandra creates the bridge. So he can give his devotees power. And we should be very aware not to think that we can jump over Krishna and become the enjoyer and become the powerful one when all the source is coming from Krishna himself. So if anyone has any questions or any thoughts or anything in relation to these different types of rasas, in relation to any of the different aspects of what is being described in this verse, we're happy to open up for some discussion. Any thoughts, anything? So as we can see here, if anyone wants to jump in, just raise your hand. So as we can see here in the last section, devotees of the Lord are engaged in a specific duty offered by the Lord, and such duties are successfully carried out without hindrance because they are ordained by the Lord. The credit of success goes not to the doer, but to the Lord. But persons with a poor fund of knowledge take the credit of success into their own accounts and give nothing to the credit of the Lord. This is the symptom of the non-devotee class of men. So we can see that this is, of course, like pride in the material world is supposed to be a good thing. But in one sense, also, even I think it's in the Bible or something, there's like, pride comes before the fall, things like that. There's like the 7 deadly sins. Pride is one of them. But it's like we're taught to have pride. I should be prideful. But this whole idea that we're the ones who are going to do it, and then we take the credit and we give no credit to the Lord, and then that is a symptom of the non-devotee class of men. And for the most part, everyone in this material world is part of this non-devotee class of men. So it's very easy for us to fall into that mentality because it's everywhere around us. This mentality of pridefulness, this mentality of not giving credit to where credit is due and taking credit for ourselves. So as Lord Brahma is putting, it is helpful for us as Lord Brahma is to make this same prayer. I pray that this may not give rise to pride as if I were the supreme. So here we have this, we've got these different type of rasas, understanding about them, the different snares. The first snare is thinking wealth and power. The second snare is thinking that we are going to become one with the Lord. And here we also understand that pride comes before the fall, and that we should be able to understand our relationship with Krishna and the fact that we are never doing anything independently, whether we understand it or recognize it or not, and that we have a specific duty to be engaged in relationship to the Lord, and through our practice of devotional service and through our practice of chanting Hare Krishna, Harinam Sankirtan, and japa, and taking prasadam and associating with devotees, then we are able to actually purify our hearts, purify our existence in such a way that we can come in touch with the true nature of who we are, the true self, the true soul, and find real happiness and peace. And from there, we can reawaken this relationship with Krishna and ultimately fulfill the purpose of our existence and find real happiness and peace. So this is pretty much what I have to say about this. Let me go back and check in my notes here. We have, if anyone wants to read more about this whole rasa kind of stuff, as I mentioned, starting around Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya 19:185, there's maybe about 20 verses that break down all the different aspects of the different categories. And there's these 5 categories, and then there's like the opposite of the categories, and there's all these different aspects of it that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is explaining to Rupa Goswami. And it's very, very interesting to try to help us understand the deeper meaning behind these things. But does anyone have any thoughts around the different things they've heard on how we can identify, or when we should identify, these different types of relationships? Because I think that's something that a lot of people think, like, oh, well, what's my relationship? How can we actually identify it? I don't know if there's any thoughts around that. I know this kind of came up a couple weeks ago in a class, on a Thursday class with Dronacharya. We were talking about this as well.
I'm just thinking we are too neophyte to find out what our relationship with Krishna is. The only thing that we can start with is just like we're part and parcel of Krishna. We're just servant of Krishna. And like Srila Prabhupada said, and acknowledge that we're not this body. We're just, we're just spirit soul. And just to realize what relations of Krishna, I mean, you have to be in an advanced stage. It takes time. Unless we get purified, it's very difficult. Srila Prabhupada never talked too much, you're just like, sometimes Prabhupada, he said, you worship Krishna and Krishna will be your kid. That's the only thing. And Prabhupada never say, you become a gopi or you become a coward boys. Prabhupada didn't talk too much about it.
Right. Yeah, there's this tendency to want to try to jump to that, or to think, oh, what's this? But yeah, I mean, ultimately, what are we? We're servants, in that servant relationship. We pray to Krishna and we purify our hearts of this pride, of this madness, and then when the time is right, we'll know. So
Hare Krishna. I would just add to that it will be revealed at the time. We can't force that to be revealed. And as you just said, that our service right now is, is kind of to follow the orders of the spiritual master and the spiritual master's mission, because that will help us identify as on the spiritual platform. And until we come to that spiritual platform, we're going to be on the material realm. So any concept of, conjugal love or parental love, we're just going to see it in terms of what we see around here in its material form. And, as long as lust, greed, anger, pride, elements of the false ego are still present, to think that, I'm thinking in terms of, friendship and things like that, of what it actually exists in its real form in the spiritual world. That's just our own illusion. That's like us just trying to jump to a adhikar or qualification that we're just not there for. It's like a child who's thinking himself as like I'm a police officer, I'm just like, and they're hearing about it and they dress up as a police officer and they think that they're a police officer, but really you can barely even, talk. Yeah, you're thinking you're something. You're not. Like, you have to go through the stages of training, purification. And that's done under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master. The spiritual master is the intimate associate of Krishna. And, following in the footsteps of nectar of instruction, following in the footsteps of, will eventually be guided and following in the footsteps of those that are intimate associates of Krishna. And at that time, things can be revealed. That's just my understanding, based on nectar of devotion.
Yes.
From what I've heard.
Jai. Thank you. That's important for us to recognize, at least to the degree that we should know we don't know, and when we know, we'll know. There will be no question. If we have to, if it's not coming from the spiritual master, then it's not, or clearly, from Krishna himself as it's coming to Lord Brahma. But yeah, we are very much in this illusion of thinking. We're like the child pretending to be a police officer. Very, very nicely said, Prabhupada. So, yes. Hare Krishna.
Also, Prabhupada say, if you prematurely try to sing that Krishna is, my lover, my singing, and then we become like a sahaja, like a pretender. Like in Vrindavan, there's a group of people, like you were talking, they just go and want to find out what the rasa is, and they start dressing like gopi,
Yeah. Yeah, that stuff happens, right?
And nowadays, there's a trend in Vrindavan. Everybody is having this small Laddu Gopal, and they're just treating Krishna not like the Supreme Person of Godhead. They're treating, okay, he's my child, and they don't follow any rules, any regulations. They will take Krishna everywhere, and I think this kind of mentality, like thinking that Krishna is my son, it should be, this is very elevated, elevated position,
Right.
To become Krishna's son, to be, we can strive for it, but we should not show, especially in ISKCON, we don't show, what our rasa is, even you're a great devotee, you just keep it confidential between you and your spiritual master, you and Krishna, and just try,
Right. And we have a nice, easy, simple process. We can just follow that as long as we don't make it too complicated. Prabhupada said it's simple for the simple and complicated for the complicated. So we'll just try to stay simple. Keep it easy. Chant Hare Krishna, take prasadam, associate with devotees. Be on the lookout for pride, madness, and recognize our position. Okay. Hare Krishna. Thank you, devotees, for coming this morning. If anyone else has anything to say, speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay. Vanchakalpatrubhyascha kripa sindhu vyevcha patitana
Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namah. Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you very much for the nice class. Thank you.
Thank you.